Where private operators have been given the chance to go up against state incumbents, we've seen lower fares, higher ridership, and an overall improvement in service quality. Italy is perhaps the best example of this, where the battle between Trenitalia and Italo for passengers has been so successful overall that it indirectly bankrupted Italy's flag carrier. But it's also worth observing the effects of competition in places like the UK, Spain and Austria. I make this video because I think the United States' Northeast Corridor, the densely used and partially high-speed line that runs from Boston to Washington DC, is ripe for this kind of open access opportunity, yet I see it rarely discussed in favour of infrastructure improvements and rolling stock acquisitions. Competition on the NEC against Amtrak's long-distance services maybe turn out to be the most cost-effective improvement you can make to the line, and I hope this video can give the reasons why some time in the limelight. First, a bit of a disclaimer about the title. I name drop Brightline because they're an established brand, but in reality, any new private operator could step up and succeed if the service is good. I think Brightline has some specific advantages over a completely new operator, which I will explain later, but it's not 100% necessary. With that in mind, what are the benefits of open access competition on the railways, and how does that apply to the North East Corridor? In short, competition drives a feedback loop of lower fares, more frequent service and more attractive amenities, all of which raises ridership, all of which brings a host of other benefits as well. The perfect example of this in action, I think, is actually local to me. In the UK, the East Coast Main Line is the only main line that sees competition between a state operator and private ones. The state being LNER and private including Grand Central, Hull Trains and, as of recently, the low-cost carrier Lumo. What is interesting when you look at the ridership statistics of recently is that the East Coast mainline operators have recovered passenger numbers a lot faster post-pandemic than any other line in the UK, particularly the Great Western and the West Coast main lines. And open access operators don't need to be massive operations to achieve that. These services just run half a dozen trains each way per day on their services. So I think it's clear that even introducing a modest amount of service competition on the North East Corridor will be a net positive. But it's worth going over where all that new ridership comes from and how it specifically applies to the North East Corridor. I think there are 5 major points to think of here. Point 1. Lower fares and better overall service quality attracts new passengers. When you face no competition, the lack of customer alternatives means that you can charge more and slack a bit on service quality. The first step for any new entrant in the market is generally to go cheaper than who's already there and provide a higher service quality, and as a result, the incumbent is now motivated to match that to keep up. Cheaper fares and better service quality attracts new passengers, it's proven. And on the North East Corridor specifically, there absolutely is a market out there for budget conscious travellers who are currently priced out of your average North East regional journey. Classy Whale made an excellent video on the idea of introducing a low-cost operator on the North East Corridor, which was an inspiration for the video I'm making right now. I don't think you necessarily need to go super cheap and budget to capture some of those travellers, but offering some advanced booking bargains and shaving dollars off the average ticket price could go a long way, especially if Amtrak follows suit and cuts fare prices as well. Flixbus and Greyhound currently offer 22 intercity bus services per day between New York and Washington DC, and these services exist despite being significantly slower and less comfortable than their rail-based counterparts. There's a real opportunity to capture budget-conscious travellers here, and if competition from the railways encourage those bus services to go cheaper or to divert and serve places that the North East Corridor can't, then that's a big benefit as well. Reason 2. Competition provides a bigger incentive to market services and attract riders through new prices and amenities. Simple, old-fashioned marketing can drive ridership, and this is especially important in a place like the North East Corridor, where it's, aside from the railways, you're also competing with air travel, cars and intercity bus services for getting around. As of right now, only United Airlines runs 34 flights per day one way between New York and Washington DC. A new entrant that tries to target some of those airline riders could maybe cut those flights down to 33 a day, maybe? Reason number 3. Better frequency and more services induces demand. Something that's important to remember with introducing competition on railways is that it tends to help the incumbent with revenue as well. For example, remember the UK statistic and how while Grand Central and Hull trains have posted impressive post-pandemic recovery numbers, so has LNER. They're not left out of the benefits that the private competition brings. This is partially because just having more service on a corridor means that more people can take trains because it's more convenient to them. It's also because people don't necessarily have brand loyalty for trains. There will be people that ride Amtrak one way and Brightline the other just because that's what's more convenient for them. Overall, when stressing the benefits of this, it's important to remember that Amtrak will get benefits from this as well, and that improving ridership on North East Corridor as a whole is a good thing, even if it means Amtrak doesn't have 100% of the ridership share for intercity services on the corridor. Number 4, private operators encourage more regional connections, both to grab new riders and due to infrastructure constraints. The UK is a good example where private operators have adopted a model of diverting to serve places that were previously underserved in order to grab new riders. You look at what Grand Central are doing with diverting to Bradford while skipping Leeds, or going to Sunderland through places like Hartlepool. You see it with Hull trains, which, as the name suggests, goes straight to Hull. And it's what the upcoming Grants Union will be doing, going all the way across the south of Wales to improve intercity travel along that corridor while bypassing most of the destinations in England. The reason for this, yes, is to pick up new riders who were previously didn't have a convenient train connection, but it's also because railway corridors are busy and it's good to save money and find places that trains aren't using the railways to its fullest capacity. And it's of course a big benefit to the people who live in those underserved places as well. On the new North East Corridor, I think of a place like New Brunswick as a place that could benefit. This is a place that has good density around the station, it's right on the doorstep of a major university, and it's connected to New Jersey Transit's commuter rail. It currently only sees a few limited Amtrak services a day, but if a private operator were to offer regular daily departures from it, then that kind of service could boom under this kind of situation. I also point to Classy Wales video, who suggested Hoboken as the service's New York terminus in order to avoid going through New York Penn. Hoboken has good dense surroundings, plenty of transit connections, both to the light rail and to the path to get you into Manhattan. More intercity services in and out of Hoboken could very well turn it into a new major rail termini in the future. So overall, when thinking of adding more service on the North East Corridor, think of the places that could receive more service where it currently doesn't. And number 5, competition provides a push for more future service and infrastructure investment and makes it easier for past investments to pay themselves off. I would point to the Spanish high-speed rail system for this. Previously, the weak link in Spain had kind of been that, despite having a massive high-speed rail system, it didn't really have the ridership to match. But once they began introducing competition on the Madrid to Barcelona line, we've seen ridership there shoot up, And now that we have Air Europe providing some competition, we've seen in December 2022, passenger numbers are now up 13.3% overall compared to a year prior, and long distance travel is up 36.1%. It's clear that private competition is helping Spain pay off its high-speed rail investments, and that's a great thing, both for the investments they've made and for more high-speed rail investments in the future. What I will also note is that the creation of multiple operators can help create a secondary market for rail equipment. In Europe, once you want to get new trains, you can typically sell those old trains off to a local franchise or a private low-budget operator because there's demand for them. Right now, when Amtrak decides to replace its Acela sets, the older Acela sets are probably going to museums or for scrap. Imagine if instead those Acela sets could be sent off to an operator who wants to run budget services on the North East Corridor. That would be a massive boon to the American rail industry. And finally, I would remind you that there are plenty of transit connections that interchange with the North East Corridor. Local metros, commuter rail, bus services. Increasing ridership on the North East Corridor increases the ridership of all of those services as well and leads to investment there. It's a positive feedback cycle that helps everyone who has a stake in the success of the North East Corridor. So by now I think I've explained why this is a good idea, but I think it's worth fantasising for a moment about what this kind of service might look like. Therefore, I present my pitch for Brightline North East. Just one idea for what a new entrant on the North East Corridor's Intercity market could look like. Here is the stop map I made for it. I think this is a good mix of hitting every major city on the New York to DC portion of the North East Corridor, serving some secondary stations with good transit connections, and serving some stations that previously didn't have a lot of intercity frequency but could really benefit from it. I'm focusing on New York to DC right now because that is where the bulk of intercity passenger travel is, and for a brand new entrant I think it's worth focusing on that before trying to expand. But once you do expand, you could definitely look at the Harrisburg line as a place you could take competing intercity service to. You can do Boston to New York in the future as well. Perhaps with, on that side of the Hudson, your intercity terminal could be Long Island City or in that area. And once all of that is set up, you probably can run a few full Boston to DC services per day. But that's just an idea of how it could expand once you've got the core section up and running. For rolling stock, I've seen a lot of people suggest something like the Stabler Kiss 200 for this service. This is a double-decker train that can achieve speeds of 125 miles per hour, putting it on par with the Amtrak Northeast Regional. And I think when you look at Westbarn, who also uses these services on a rail corridor with a kind of similar profile to the North East Corridor, you can see how these trains can do a great job on it. And finally, the reason I mention Brightline specifically is because they already have railway operations and could definitely leverage that to get a bit of a head start. Imagine being able to take Brightline North East to Baltimore Airport, fly down to Orlando, and then take Brightline Florida to Miami. That kind of integration could really help drive new riders on the North East Corridor. Plus, it's very much proven that Brightline has some good amenities to them. Their last mile services, their lounges and amenities that they provide. Overall, I think they have a bit of a head start on knowing how to provide a new competitive railway service. And if entering the new North East Corridor, I think they would do well. Overall, that's my take on introducing competition to the North East Corridor. It's important to stress that I am not advocating for privatisation of rail service, nor am I suggesting that Amtrak should be taken over by Brightline or something like that. But I do believe that if well regulated, a new entrant to compete with Amtrak on the North East Corridor could bring great benefits to passenger rail in the United States. And it's perhaps the cheapest and most cost-effective way of doing it right now. That is all I have. Thank you for watching.